Well, thanks everybody for coming out this evening. My name's Mariya Fogarasi, and I have presented at the Westland Public Library previously, so I'd like to thank the library for hosting me again, and also to the City of Westland TV program, Craig Hebert, for doing the filming. I was incredibly fortunate. First, I should tell you that, that I have lived overseas for a total of 44 years in various countries. I had been working in Germany when I met my husband, who was a Foreign Service officer, and we continued on to some other countries. But this was a special trip. This was not related to a place where we ever lived, but 3 years ago, our family had the very good fortune of traveling to Jordan for 1 week. I had always wanted to go, so it was a lifelong dream of mine. And this is my presentation this evening about the week, or 7 or 8, 9 days that we spent in the country. And so the title of my talk is From Ancient Amman to the Deserts of Jordan. And this is a picture, you'll see this later on in the show. Jordan has a spectacular archeological site called Petra, which is often used as a symbol for the country. This is one of the buildings there, but again, we'll get to that. So I always talk a little bit about history and geography at the beginning of the talk. Jordan is known as the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and really Jordan per se, as we know it today, is only 100. Well, this year they celebrated their 100th anniversary, even though they're a very ancient country and area of the world, going back 7,000 years. But after the Ottoman Empire disintegrated and there was a revolt around 1916-17, there was a prince who came up from Saudi Arabia, from Mecca, and he was of the Hashemite Dynasty, Hashem having been the great-grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad. So the kings of Jordan are direct descendants of Muhammad, which gives them a special status in the region, and it's officially known as the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. This is what Jordan looks like today. This is the West Bank, the tumultuous West Bank we hear and read so much about in the news. And this was actually annexed by Jordan in 1948 and became part of the country. However, there was, in the 1967 war with Israel, Jordan lost that territory. The couple of things right at the beginning to know about Jordan is that it's about the size of Ohio. It is 75% desert and only 10% arable land. It is almost totally dependent on resources from outside of the country. Mostly gas, on the Arab gas pipeline coming from Egypt. It has no hydroelectric power, no coal, no oil, so it purchases oil from Saudi Arabia. It's very big as far as tourism goes. In 2019, tourism accounted for 14% of the GDP, and you'll see some of the sites that entice people to travel there. And here's what happened in 1967. So as you can imagine, in this area of the world, the water is very scarce, the rainfall is not predictable, and there was a lot of strife and going back and forth with Israel about the Jordan River, and also up here we have Lake Kinneret, which we tend to know as Lake Galilee. And so this snowballed and became an altercation, and here you have in 1967 the Arab world getting ready to go up against Israel, and but again things snowballed. So down here is a port on the Red Sea, and down here are the Straits of Tiran, leading out into shipping lanes, and Egypt blockaded the straits down here. And then, so that was the final straw, and Israel launched a preemptive strike on the 5th of June, 1967, and by the 10th of June, it was all over. Israel won the war, and this area here, Jordan lost this area, which to the king at the time, and you'll hear more about him, King Hussein, was a lifelong sorrow that he had lost this area. After that, the Palestine Liberation Organization moved their headquarters into Jordan until there was a very sad and bloody civil war in 1970, and then the PLO was actually exiled up to Lebanon. So since then, this has been an occupied territory, so it's not officially part of Jordan anymore. That was the war. Okay, this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to visit. I mentioned King Hussein just a moment ago, and I will tell you more about him, but he was the ruler. He was born in 1935, and he was on the throne for almost 40 years, and he had 4 wives, and his 4th wife was American. She was a woman who was born in New Jersey into a very privileged family. She was a Princeton grad. Her name was Lisa Hallaby. Her father had Arab American, he was of Arab American descent, and so she had an introduction to the Arab world, and she met King Hussein just after he had become widowed. His young bride, Queen Aliyah, was tragically killed in a helicopter accident. She had visiting a hospital on that day, and so when Lisa met him, Lisa was 15 years younger than King Hussein, and they had a very secretive whirlwind romance, and she was really full of doubts and hesitations because he had a bit of reputation as being a ladies' man, and she knew him for such a short time, but she married him, and their marriage was very successful. So she became Queen Noor. Noor, she took a whole new name, a whole new life, Noor meaning light, and she wrote this book, Leap of Faith, Memoirs of an Unexpected Life, which she really did take a leap of faith marrying this man. But it worked. He sadly passed away in 1999. He had cancer. He did have many treatments at the Mayo Clinic. He was quite revered, so that was tragic. But so this really propelled me. It was one of the reasons why I had always wanted to visit the country of Jordan. So here we are, our family. We have 5 people, and I knew that Royal Jordanian Airlines flies out of Detroit. However, 2 of the 5 were on the East Coast. And we found out that Royal Jordanian, if we fly from Detroit, we would make a stop in Montreal before going over to Amman. If we were to fly from New York City, we could fly directly. And it just snowballed the idea that we could spend some time in somebody's apartment in New York City beforehand. It was at Christmas time. We flew on Christmas Day, which made our flights cheaper because not that many people really want to fly on Christmas Day. So here we are taking off in Royal Jordanian Airlines from New York City direct over to Amman, Jordan. And we're greeted by the country flag at the airport. And this flag has the pan-Arab colors of black, white, and green, which were adopted after the Ottoman Revolt of 1916 when the area really came into its own. That red chevron is representative of the Hashemite Dynasty, and the white pointed star represents the Quran, verses from the 1st chapter of the Quran. And this was the arrivals board when we were in the airport, and you can tell right away you're in a very different and, for us, relatively exotic part of the world. There were some of the places I actually had to look up. Sharjah, the United Arab Emirates, Asyut in Egypt, and Sabiha in Turkey were 3 of the ones I didn't recognize right away. But lots of fun to look at the board, and good for your geography lesson, actually. And then this is, you might not always see the portraits of all 3 of these gentlemen, but you do see the portrait of the current king, Abdullah, almost everywhere in the country. So this would be King Hussein, his father, and then Abdullah, the current king, and then Crown Prince Hashem on the right. And there's a lot of text here, but basically what you want to know about Jordan is that the king has an enormous amount of power. He appoints the government, and it's responsible to Parliament. He can approve legislation, and he can dissolve Parliament. So King Hussein is really a 40th generation direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. He fought 3 wars with Israel. He lost the West Bank, as we had said. He successfully led his country through 4 turbulent decades of the Arab-Israeli conflict and the Cold War. He was revered by many, seen as a peacemaker, reigned for 47 years. And on the personal side, he was an avid pilot. He collected vintage motor cars, and he was a ham radio operator. And I had said previously that he was married 4 times, and altogether he fathered 11 children. So this is his funeral, just to show. We have here, they're tiny, but President Bill Clinton, President Jimmy Carter, This is his son, Abdullah, looking very solemn. This is Prince Charles, and I believe this is a gentleman from France. But so really the whole world was mourning when Hussein passed away. And all in all, Jordan has been a very stable ally for the United States in the Middle East. So, and he was a good friend. And his son, Abdullah, born in 1962. I have to keep being careful with my clicking here. So he's on the throne right now, and he has handled this, this Arab Spring and made concessions and introduced proportional representation. He has navigated the influx of 1.4 Syrian refugees into his country, many, many challenges there. But he is popular for maintaining stability, promoting interfaith dialogue, and a moderate understanding of Islam. We should say that even though Jordan doesn't hold the West Bank anymore, that he is still the custodian of Muslim and Christian sacred rites in Jerusalem. So this is not publicly known in Jordan, I read. They have blocked this, but I don't know if you heard about the Pandora Papers that were exposed recently, where they made public that certain rulers around the world have bought expensive properties through shell companies. And Abdullah is one of them. And it's not good for Abdullah to have this news spread around his country when he's imposing austerity measures and other things like that. But he apparently has a $23 million property on the California coastline, as well as properties in London and Washington, D.C. His father had properties in London and Washington, but he used them for government purposes and meetings and receptions. And we're not quite sure what Abdullah's intent is, but anyway, I'm not saying that he's, a bad person or anything, but these papers were very damaging to his reputation. And this would be the Crown Prince, Hussein, who will succeed his father someday. He's a Georgetown graduate, and he's currently a first lieutenant in the Jordanian Royal Forces. So that would be the royal family. And so going back here again, the borders of Jordan, I don't know how these were carved out, but the border with Saudi Arabia is composed of these lines right along here, and then they have this funny little bump at the end, and that would be the Treaty of Hadda in 1925. That little bump was known back then as Churchill's sneeze, but if you look at today's map, Churchill's sneeze is gone up there in that corner, so I'm not quite sure where that went. But anyway, so that's the border with Saudi Arabia, and then the borders with Iraq and Syria were also in the 20s carved out, and when this whole region was being settled. So this is what present-day Jordan looks like. So again, the greatest obstacles to the economy are the scarcity of water, reliance on oil or gas from Egypt, and then regional instability. And those are huge obstacles, but so far they've managed to navigate this very, very well. And so what we did was we flew to Amman, and we actually, when we were in Amman, we did go to Jerusalem, over to Jerusalem in the West Bank for one day. And then we went straight down here to a desert area that I'll be talking about called Wadi Rum. And then Petra, our ultimate destination, this absolutely stunningly beautiful, gorgeous archeological site. And on the way back, we went along the Dead Sea coast just to be able to say that we'd seen that. And Jordan is very fortunate. It has one port down here, Aqaba. We did not visit Aqaba. I had been to Jerusalem in another lifetime in 1976, years ago, and I had also been down here on the Israeli side in Eilat at a seacoast town called Eilat, which looked very, very different in 1976 from what it does today. But we knew that Aqaba would be a seaside resort, and we just didn't have enough time for that. But we were very content with everything that we were able to see. So very briefly, after World War I, the Ottoman Empire was disintegrating, and their control stagnated, and there was the Great Arab Revolt. Then, when these countries thought that they were going to be able to handle their own affairs, the British and the French secretly divided up the territory, so they didn't quite get what they thought they were going to get. They secretly negotiated the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and so they cut them into spheres of influence. And the kingdom of Syria was declared in 1920. And then we said that Abdullah came up from Mecca and arrives in, literally Transjordan means across the Jordan River. So initially it was known as Transjordan. It became the Emirate of Transjordan, and it was a British protectorate. So English is very common in Jordan, also with the street signs, which was very practical for us. And then it became an independent state in 1946 and renamed to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan in 1949. And that is its current status. So, and this was the symbol celebrating the 100 years. So again, I had said that the civilization goes back 7,000 years, but it's really just to say that Jordan is only 100 years old is hard to believe, but officially the kingdom is 100 years old. So here we are, we're looking out from our Airbnb over Amman, and my husband did all the bookings for the trip, and what a surprise, it shouldn't have been, but the Airbnb was owned by a gentleman whose cousin is 2 hours north of Detroit. So, and the name Amman comes from one of the civilizations that lived there in the 13th century, the Ammonites. It was originally Rabat Amman, meaning the capital city or the king's quarters, and now it's just Amman. Although if we roll back the years to when the Romans and the Greeks were there, we were very surprised to find out the name of the city was Philadelphia, because there was a Macedonian ruler, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, and he gave the city his name. So Amman was Philadelphia for many, many years. So we're looking out, it is a hilly city, and we're looking out from the Airbnb, and we should say that despite the age, there is a very modern side to Amman, and because of the stability, Amman, along with Dubai and Doha, which is the capital of Qatar, or Qatar, some people say, those would be the 3 cities where a multinational corporation would like to be established with headquarters. And so just a juxtaposition there with those 2 buildings. This is where we went. We loved the name of this street right below our Airbnb, Rainbow Street, and we went, my son is very good, you know, at looking these places up and saying we absolutely have to go here, and it was very, very low-key restaurant, like you'd find anywhere in Metro Detroit, really. The food was just about the same. And then in many places, if the king is visited, this is a very young king, Abdullah, the crown prince is also very young there, but there will be a picture hanging on the wall of when the king was there, or some article about the king, a newspaper article. And so you will recognize our dinner on that evening over here. You will recognize, of course, the falafel, or the baba ganoush, or the hummus, and the pita bread. And this would have been a fancier meal that we had in another restaurant at a different time. So more or less the same ingredients, possibly with lamb, some kind of meat added in, but always a delicious meal. And if you're a vegetarian, you have it made, also traveling in that part of the world. And so no issues there. We have 1 vegetarian. And so the next morning we decided to start walking, and we decided we were going to go see the Roman ruin sites, but we did stroll by a mosque. And so Muslim, the state religion is Islam, although anyone is allowed to practice as long as there's nothing offensive or illegal in what they're doing. But it is a Muslim country. The king has to be Muslim. And then we have the Sunnis and the Shias, and just in a nutshell, the difference being they disagree on the succession after the Prophet Muhammad passed away in 632, which is why we have these 2 different parts of Islam, but 92% of the Jordanians are Sunni Islam, very small percent Shia, and there is a very tiny Christian population as well. So we went by this mosque, and then of course with the mosque we had the calling to prayer, hearing that you know, during the day, which is also very lovely and different from what we have here. And so this is, and we're strolling along, and we can see anything from this shop on the left that looks like it's been there since ancient times, and you wonder who's going to go in there and find anything, but you never know. And then you've got sort of a jazzy shop with bangles for costumes, and then you have the lovely Middle Eastern sweets, and you have a lot of bilingual signs, you know, Pepsi Cola everywhere, and a truck that's delivering bread. And so the first site that we came to was a site that was fenced, so we didn't enter it. So the Nymphaeum, which is a Roman public fountain from the 2nd century, but it is currently under, well, sometimes I think more of their sites should be fenced off, but that's not my judgment because, of course, with tourists crawling over and over and over and over, you can get some damage. But this was fenced off, and we can see on the right the United States supporting the archeological efforts there. We do, the World Bank and the United States are financial supporters of the country of Jordan. So we continued, and then we have 2 things here I want to show you. We have, well, first of all, this is a Hashemite Plaza named after the dynasty, which is about 10 years old. So there is a hilltop citadel here, and on this side, there is a Roman Coliseum. And a lot of the countries of the world will put these large letters where people can hang on the letters or hug the heart and have their picture taken. So this is all part of the Hashemite Plaza. They've done it very, very nicely. And the Coliseum is fascinating. It was built in the 2nd century. It can seat 6,000 people, honoring the Emperor Antonius Pius. And from a different angle here, you can see that it's steeply raked into the hillside. I found this, I think, went on the internet. But it faced north, so no one had any issues with the sun in their faces. They do use it now for the prize for the Amman Marathon. There is a book festival that is held there, and there's also a music festival. And there were 2 entrances then at the ground floor, one for the stage and one for the orchestra. And that's, again, the Hashemite Plaza in front of it here. But to my surprise, we could crawl all over this, and here it is from another viewpoint, but we could walk all over these stairs and up and down and everything, which I was a little bit surprised about. You can't do that in Rome, for instance, when you go to the Coliseum. But, and then the bilingual signs, right? It doesn't matter if there's a misspelling. The point is that it's easier for you to get the information that the theater, they call it, was built during the time of Antonius Pius. So that was, that's just right in the heart of Amman, right downtown, and it was a great visit. We, at the base of the Coliseum, there were 2 small museums. One is the Museum of Popular Traditions, and you already saw King Abdullah in one picture with the kufiya, the red and white checked headscarf, which is a symbol, a status symbol in Jordan, and which originated with the Desert Patrol. So we saw that in the museum. Then we saw a mosaic from Roman times. We saw some ethnic costumes from different parts of the country, and also a statue probably from Roman times over there on the right. And again, just a whole lot of, you know, the hotel, the place where we went for lunch, and old columns, just an open air archeological treasure, really, just to walk around Amman. And then this beautiful, beautiful sweet display, this shop, this pastry candy shop. So then the other place is the Citadel. I had pointed that out. It's high up on the hill here. It's actually Amman's highest point, and it has walls. Sometimes there are walls, sometimes the walls have broken down, but look at all the ages represented: bronze and iron, Roman and Byzantine, known for going up there and watching sunsets, and also you can look down on the Coliseum over here, so you get really a spectacular view of the city from up at the Citadel. So this structure, and then they have, again, all very easy for, well, English has become pretty much the language of the tourist world, but very easy overview, again, having had the name Philadelphia and Amman, and then going through the different eras with the British Mandate and the Emirate, and then being the Hashemite king. So a nice historical overview up there. And then we see this temple, which we believe was the Temple of Hercules. Scholars are not really sure whether it was ever completed. It's very large. The only thing really that is left are these columns and the pedestal right there. But it would have been probably about 100 feet long by 80 feet wide, with the outer sanctum area even larger. So that is up there. This is what scholars think it might have looked like had it ever been finished. They do believe it would have been larger than temples that you would have seen in the Roman world elsewhere. And then next to it, they've got the remains of a statue, but sadly, only the fingertips and an elbow joint. So because this statue is estimated to have been 40 feet tall, it has been attributed to Hercules because of his incredible strength. And the Amman was susceptible to earthquakes, and so at some point the whole thing just fell. And there were a lot of jokes that that the marble Hercules graced the countertops of the wealthy in Amman, and then more jokes because his fingernails look like they're so well manicured here. Anyway, so that is what you want to see when you're on top of the Citadel. And the other thing you're going to see up there is completely different era, an 8th century Umyad palace. So Umyad was one of the caliphates established after the death of Muhammad, a caliphate being a political governing body where the region is practicing Islam. And most of their palaces are out in the desert, but this one is atop the Citadel. And this would have been a very elaborate palace and residential structure at the time, but not much is left. But what is left is this absolute fabulous audience chamber here. This has been renewed, this dome shape. And interestingly enough, it was built on top of a Byzantine church, because after the Romans came the Byzantines. So with that structure in mind, this would have been an audience hall where the leader could have received his army or could have received leaders of expeditions. So the Umyad Palace, and this is actually one of the most important archaeological buildings, not only in Amman, but in the entire country. This is, again, juxtaposing the old with the new, and this is, they've left the remains of what isn't anymore up there, just to give you that idea and that understanding. And keep this flagpole back here in mind. They've also found remains of water cisterns up there in the Umyad Palace complex, because you can imagine if you don't get much rainfall and water is scarce, you really want to have efficient cisterns. So again, the old and the new, and then this flagpole, the Ragadan flagpole. The royal family, I believe they have 3 or 4 palaces in Amman, and one of them, this flag flies at the Ragadan Palace. It's absolutely massive. It's 100 by 200 feet, and apparently you can see it from 20 kilometers away. However, because of its size, if there's any kind of wind, they don't raise the flag because the noise is just incredible. So, and again, you can get an idea of how hilly the city is. So we also wanted to visit the Jordan Museum, which is not also opened, I believe, 2014-15, fairly recent, where you can see the country's best archaeological treasures, the ones that can be moved at any rate together. And so we, for instance, we saw a mosaic there, or we saw this sculpture. They had a special exhibit about 1,001 inventions at that time, which is interesting. But I would almost say the highlight of this museum, because they're just so very famous, are the, again, we have the kufia, talking about the history of the kufia and how it's a source of national pride, and in the desert can protect from extreme heat as well as extreme cold. And the tassels, the size of the tassels, showing off the scarf's value and the owner's status. And again, the current King Abdullah wearing the kufia, which is always red and white in Jordan. But these Dead Sea Scrolls, I think, are the highlight of the, well, it's hard to say what was the highlight because there was so much there. But the Dead Sea Scrolls are so famous, and they're about 1,000 documents, usually made on animal parchment or on papyrus, and they detail either biblical texts or secular life in the 1st and 2nd century BC. And they were found in 1947, as the legend goes, over in these caves on the West Bank by a Bedouin shepherd boy who was looking for a lost sheep. Apparently he found the first one, and then there were more and more found successively. So this details the entire history of how they were found and what they're all about and how valuable they are. This one over here is very interesting. There's one of them called the Copper Scroll that is completely different from the other ones, which has already led to one of the biggest treasure hunts in history, because this Copper Scroll details where treasures are to be found. Over 4,600 pieces of gold and silver are detailed on this, and people have tried to follow, but I have to read, the clues are very nebulous. And for instance, one clue will say, in the salt pit that is under the steps, 41 talents of silver. Or in the cave of the old washer's chamber on the third terrace, 65 ingots of gold. But there's never any starting point given, so the ability to follow instructions is almost impossible. And who knows the real origin of this or how it came about, but the treasure is estimated to be over $1 billion, but you can imagine the treasure hunts that have gone on. So the Dead Sea Scrolls are still a fascinating topic today. In 2017, BBC reported that Israeli archaeologists had found another cave that was not yet known. There were no scrolls. They believed it had been looted by Bedouins in the 1950s, but they did find the jars, and they found evidence of wrapping and then the leather that would have been used to tie. And so this is always an ongoing fascination. And even more intriguing than that, in 2021, Harper's Magazine had an article on how to forge a Dead Sea Scroll. So there is a family green in the United States, and they run Hobby Lobby creative shops. And they also opened a Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. in 2017. And so they started to buy some old weathered fragments they believed to be Dead Sea Scrolls. But when scholars took a close look at them, they were very suspicious because of the original cache. About 25% are about the Old Testament and 75% about secular life. But these were all about the Old Testament. And then also I put, the writing was not consistent with what was already known, with uneven pen strokes and awkward spacing. And so the Green family called in, I believe it's called Art Fraud. It's a company that deals with, as you can imagine, art fraud. And they were found to be fake. And they were all from the same source. So someone was out to make big money. I'm not quite sure whether that mystery was ever solved. But anyway, just a fascinating topic, the Dead Sea Scrolls. So after we left the Jordan Museum, well, this was a different day, but I really wanted to see this Royal Automobile Museum. And we live in Dearborn, and so our adult children, well, we have Greenfield Village and the Henry Ford Museum. I said, no, I really want to see this collection that, that King Hussein had, even predating King Hussein. And it took us almost an hour in heavy traffic to get there. And it was dark when we got there, and it was very quiet. And I thought, no, please don't let it be closed. But it was open, and there were very few people, and just this absolutely gorgeous collection of vintage automobiles. You could always tell when the king was coming down the street with this crown on the front, and then different backgrounds. This is, of course, set at Petra, and just really, really enjoyable to walk around and look. And hang on, there was back here, for instance, this probably would have been, I'm not sure which flag of which country, but prior to that, there was the Union Jack, maybe when Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip had visited. There was the cover of a Condé Nast Traveler showing, I didn't show them here, but Hussein also collected, King Hussein. I don't mean any disrespect when I say that. He collected motorcycles. So here he is with Queen Noor, and they're down in Wadi Rum. And it says, Royal Trailblazer, Jordan's Hussein opens his spectacular kingdom. So they must have had an article at that time. Over on the far right here, this is the Martian Rover used in the movie The Martian with Matt Damon, which was filmed in Wadi Rum in 2015. And the Hollywood film crew gifted the Martian Rover to the country of Jordan for the way they had been received with great hospitality when they came to do the filming. And this one is equally interesting. This is the 1947 Havilland Dove. I had mentioned that King Hussein was an avid pilot. So this is actually a very sad story, but when he came to the throne, he could not succeed his father. His father had a mental illness, and so he had flown to Jerusalem with his grandfather to attend prayers at a mosque in Jerusalem, and his grandfather was assassinated. So he was 17 at the time, and he was in shock. And when they went to fly back to Amman, the pilot of the plane, a Scotsman named Jack Dalgleish, brought this young, totally grief-stricken prince up to sit next to him, and he showed him the controls and was just trying to get his mind involved with something else. And Hussein became an avid pilot, and Jack Dalglish was a lifelong friend. And this was always, always his favorite plane, although he flew many. So that is also outdoors in the museum. And you can see it was dark, I had mentioned, by the time we got there. So just very beautiful display. So we did not go to this town of Jerash, which is about an hour north of Amman, but again, just a fabulous display of Greco-Roman antiquities and heritage with 2 Roman theaters, and you've got the colonnades, the colonnaded streets here. Absolutely gorgeous, certainly worth a visit if we had had more time. But what we did visit was we went to the River Jordan, and I said that we were going to go to Jerusalem for a one-day outing, and so we stopped at Bethany beyond the Jordan, which is the site where we believe, and the Vatican has confirmed this, and Christian Orthodox Church has confirmed that this is the site where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. And you can walk around this area here. The tourists will go down these steps. The entrance is free. However, if you wish to be baptized there, you pay a rental for the baptismal robe. And I believe it's fuzzy, but this would be a group of people who decided to have the baptismal rite done there. This area was heavily mined after the 1967 war, but then in the 90s, Jordan signed a peace treaty with Israel, and the Jordanian royal family really wanted to have this area demined and made safe, and so obviously a very, very popular visiting site. So that was Bethany beyond the Jordan. So in order to get over to Jerusalem, we have to cross into an occupied territory. It's not impossible. In fact, it's done all the time, but you just have to be very patient. You have to cross what's known as the Allenby Bridge at that point. The Jordanians now call it the King Hussein border crossing as a tribute to King Hussein. This is what it would have looked like after the 1967 war. We were probably at the border for about 2.5 hours. It's not so much the Jordanian side as the Israeli side. We had to pay $50 each for a daily visum, and you just have to bring a book and sit and be patient. It's all a bureaucratic process, but we were able to get into this territory and go for our one day in Jerusalem. And this is part of that area. We did not go, for instance, to Masada. Masada is the celebrated mountain stronghold and a UNESCO heritage site where the Jews held out for 3 years before they took their own lives rather than falling to the Romans who were laying siege to the area. And you can go up in a cable car, and there are absolutely fabulous views over the area and over to the Dead Sea. We also did not go to Bethlehem. You go into a 6th century church. Down into the basement, there's a grotto and a silver star marking the spot where we believe Jesus Christ was born. I had been to those places in 1976. Again, we only had one day, so we concentrated on the City of Gold here. And so this would have been one of the gates going into the old city of Jerusalem, and a tribute to each of the monotheistic religions of the world. This is the Wailing, or the Western Wall, which is all that remains of the wall of the Second Temple Mount, so sacred to the Jewish religion. This here is one of the oldest churches in the world, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, believed to be the site of Golgotha, where Christ was crucified and also rose again. And this was, in the last 10 years, has been renovated by a Greek company. So it was looking actually quite beautiful inside. And then the very sacred shrine to Islam and the landmark of the city of Jerusalem, the Dome of the Rock, which is just an archeologically attested monument to Islam, and also not only a religious site, but also a work of art, and in this world revered by many. We could not go inside. It happened to be closed on that particular day, but even just walking around the outside was impressive. And so that was our day in Jerusalem. And we had, for instance, I skipped by all the souvenirs back here, and that you can browse, and there are a lot of market in Jerusalem, and things to buy and look at. So now we're going all the way down to the south, and we're going to a desert area, the high plateau on the western edge of the Arabian Desert, this area called Wadi Rum. I've mentioned it a couple of times already with the filming of The Martian. And Wadi Rum is absolutely spectacular. It's basically an area, if you were to take the size of all of New York City, it's uninhabited except for some Bedouin tribes, or you might see a building belonging to the Desert Patrol, but it's basically uninhabited. It's a big tourist draw. It has here we are. So it has a lot of these spectacular, just pinnacle-like rock formations, and then the sands. And here we are arriving at the visitor center, and here is also another movie that was filmed down there, Lawrence of Arabia, the Hollywood blockbuster in 1962. So we arrived at the visitor center, and by the way, here was the Wi-Fi code that we had in our van driving down, which made the younger generation extremely happy that they had this Wi-Fi in their van. And so, but we got there, and now we're going to go out to our assigned Bedouin goat hair tent village that we had chosen. So we have all our luggage, and we're climbing into the pickup truck, and we're leaving. This says reception area here. We're leaving this behind us, and we're going out into the desert. And so Wadi Rum is studied by geologists from all over the world because it has just about every mineral known on our planet. And the red color of the sand and the rock formations comes from the presence of iron oxide. And there's also a reservoir of fossil fresh water left over from previous eras, but it is a desert area. So this is the movie Lawrence of Arabia. We have Sir Laurence Olivier, we have Omar Sharif, we have Peter O'Toole, and we have here Anthony Quinn. And the Ottoman Revolt, 1916-17, the British Lieutenant T.E. Lawrence, who had lived among the tribes, is sent to the tribes, and the British are very keen on getting the Ottomans out, and so he's sent to rally the tribes and to convince them that they should march on Aqaba and attack an Ottoman fort there. So you can just imagine this, the number of people that were down making this movie at that time, and that movie is still, you know, very famous today. So tribute to Lawrence of Arabia. And this is a very artist picturesque, but the colors that change depending upon the time of day with the sunlight make it just very, very special and an artist's dream. And we were there in December, so it was 59, roughly 59 degrees during the day and 39 at night. 59 isn't cold per se, but boy, when you're in the desert and that sun goes down, it was cold. But we also had a star-studded sky, literally the stars as thick as if they were a carpet that you could walk on. It was absolutely gorgeous. And we are approaching this is our little camp here. So we had one of these tents to ourselves, and it was a very simple camp. Here, there were always a couple of young camels around, and our family had one of these tents. And then there was a tent that was the common area tent where the meals were served. And of course, in December, the flaps were down. Here, they've probably rolled them up during the day just to get some fresh air, but very ornately decorated. There is a stove here. There was always tea. There was breakfast served here, and there was dinner served here. And it was a youth hospital atmosphere where everybody was exchanging, you know, oh, where have you been and where are you going next, and exchanging stories and what did you see, kind of thing like that. So really a lot of fun. This is one of our hosts here. So for centuries, the Bedouin tribes out in the desert would be the ones who, if Christian pilgrims were passing through, they would be very hospitable towards them. They would know where the water was to be found. And again, most of them have moved to city life now, but there are some, and of course this is the big tourist trade in Jordan, to have them entertained. So this is what they called the Bedouin Microwave, which was there were meat and potatoes and carrots, and then they lowered it into the ground until it cooked. And when it came up, we all had dinner, along with the side dishes you saw previously. So that was great. And then in the evening, here are our two daughters. They're nestled up against that nice warm stove reading. And so that's where they found their comfort. This is the entrance to our tent. We basically, it was just 2 beds, 1 bed, so 5 beds. There wasn't room for anything else except for your luggage. And we left our shoes outside so we didn't track the sand in. And there are actually 2 people in bed there. One person is there, one person is there, saying, "Why are you taking these pictures, Mom?" So the bathhouse was extremely simple. There are 2 sinks here. And off to the right, there were 3 or 4 or 5 toilet stalls. It was unisex. And then one of the stalls had a hose, I suppose if you wanted to shower, but there was no hot water. So I don't know if anybody showered when we were there in December. I actually didn't even get undressed for 3 days because I just got so cold at night. And then the water from the sinks was a tiny trickle. So here, you know, there's one sign on one sink that says, "Save water, save the earth." And on the other sink, it said, "Conserve water, you are in a desert." So I was lucky if I could floss and brush my teeth at night, and I was happy about that. But I wouldn't have traded the experience for the world. But if you want, you know, your 5-star Hilton, you really don't want to go spend 3 nights at Wadi Rum. So maybe you could do a day trip, I don't know. But it was a fascinating experience. And then during the day, the Bedouins would have these trucks, and we would all get into a truck, and we would go out touring these sand dunes or these rock formations. Some of the braver ones, you know, could walk over them. We had a picnic. Here is our Bedouin host, our particular group, preparing our picnic. I should mention that there are also no bathrooms out here. So again, if you are, if you are not into that, if you don't want to go behind a rock, you might not want to have these 3 days. But we were up for that. And so this is what we did. This is what we did. And excuse me, there's some hieroglyphics here. This appears to be leading into some kind of a cave. I don't know how far people went. But, and this is a big, I think that's shown in the next picture. Here it's the sand dune that people could climb up, and here are some people up at the top. And these are all the tourists. This would have been December 2019, where life was still normal, and so there were a lot of tourists in the desert. We met a lot of people from Europe. We didn't really meet many from North America. A lot from Italy, who told us there was some super saver plane fare from Amman to Rome. And anyway, it's always fun to trade stories, like I had already said. Excuse me for just a moment. And then our kids loved those baby camels that were roaming around. And so here we are. We just had these great 3 days, and we're back at the visitor center, and we are going to leave this incredibly beautiful area of Wadi Rum. And so, and again, a tribute to Matt Damon with the 2015 movie, The Martian. So, and oh yeah, and recently, this wasn't originally in my presentation, but I read that part of Dune, which I have not seen, was also filmed there. And if you can see this landscape, you could well imagine that having been engineered by the filmmakers. So we are headed now for Petra, and the area is very sparse, and we're headed for the town of Wadi Musa, and which also translates to Valley of Moses, because allegedly that was where Moses struck a stone with his stick, and he found a spring, and this would be the spring that eventually brought water to Petra and nourished Petra, which you'll hear about. So yeah, Valley of Moses. So we're about 160 miles from Amman, and we're getting ready to explore this absolutely fabulous site. And we had also, again, booked our hotel from the United States, the Shara Mountain Hotel. So what do you think was uppermost on everybody's mind when they walked into this hotel? Not Petra, right, a hot shower, right. And the hotel did not disappoint. So everybody had a hot shower and washed their hair, and et cetera, et cetera. And again, always, just a fabulous buffet at dinner time. We happened to arrive here on New Year's Eve. I was surprised to learn that New Year's Eve is not celebrated in the country of Jordan. It is in Lebanon, I've been told, but in Jordan, it's not anything special. However, the foreigners were, of course, out to celebrate. So my son, again, with his trusty tour guide instincts, found an Irish pub, of all things. And we were in there like sardines, shoulder to shoulder, just people from all over the world having a great time. And then we thought, oh, January 1st, surely who's going to go to Petra on January 1st? Oh, we were so wrong. There were the usual crowds as always. So this is the entrance to Petra. The flags, and again, these big letters where you can pose and have your picture taken. And but anyway, so obviously we did not stay out too late on New Year's Eve. It wouldn't have been advisable because we only had that one day to explore Petra. So this is moving forward in time, but Petra was the capital city for a people known as the Nabataeans. And this is moving forward after Rome had conquered the Nabataeans. But I do want to show you, it's always amazing to consider just how large the Roman Empire was. Staggering, really, how far they got. But this down here was where the Nabataeans lived and ruled, and they made Petra their capital city. And after the Romans conquered it, they called Petra Arabia Petra, Petra meaning rock, from Peter. You know, you are Peter, upon this rock I will build my church. So this is down here. And the Nabataeans were Arabian nomads. They became skilled traders. They traded anywhere from the Far East, China and India, over down on the Arabian Peninsula and out to the becoming very wealthy civilizations of the Greeks and the Romans. They would trade in spices, iron, copper, sugar, things like that. But how they built their wealth and how they became fabulously wealthy was from incense. And so they were skilled traders, they were skilled stone carvers, which you will see, and they were very good at harvesting the rainwater and at agriculture, and they could not have succeeded. The earliest trace of the Nabataeans, or of Petra, goes back to the 4th century BC, although really just the evidence has been found as of the 2nd century BC onward, and then up to about, we said 106 AD when the Romans came in. So here you have all these routes, and so the incense came up from here, from we have Yemen here, and we have present-day Oman, and they were really the main players. But when the Manaean kingdom fell apart, Petra, they had been middlemen, but they became the main traders in this incense, which came up in the form of frankincense and myrrh. And the Romans and the Greeks used this for everything. They used it in their ceremonies, they used it in funeral rites and for embalming and for rituals, and they wanted this incense, and they were willing to pay a lot of money for it. So up came this incense in these, and this is a very poetic painting here, and this is something I took from a modern tourist magazine. So, but you have to imagine 12 weeks from southern Arabia up to Petra, and these massive hundreds of camels moving in these caravans across the desert, and the distance which they covered in a day would be determined by where the next stop was and the availability of water. And along the way, the merchants at every stop had to pay taxes or duties, and the Nabataeans grew rich because the wealthy civilizations of the world really wanted this incense, and they were willing to pay. And that's how they built their empire. So here we are back at the beginning again, ready to go in on New Year's Day. And this is just basically, we're just going to follow this. We're over here at the Visitors Center, and we are going to walk along this road until we come to a very narrow gorge called the Sikh. And then we're going to follow here and see the first big landmark and continue on into this area here. So you can walk. Most people walk in. It's really hard. It's really hard, I think, if you're not in good physical shape, although you can rent a carriage to take you part of the way. And then they have the ornate camels, but the camels do not walk from the entrance. From the entrance to the beginning of the gorge is already 1.2 kilometers. There are horses, so there are a variety, and this is a little donkey. But again, most people walk. And you can already see evidence of how the Nabataeans were able to channel this water, this spring from Wadi Musa, into their city here, this water that was so scarce. So we are walking along there, and we are coming to the Sikh, which is here. It's a narrow gorge, and actually what it is a geological fault that was split apart by tectonic forces. And you continue through this gorge, which it sometimes is only 3 meters wide, usually a little bit wider than that, and that rises up above you on both sides. And they have done very nicely here with bilingual signs. This is a place for some kind of a votive offering in the wall here, and again the channels that the waters could be running through. So in its heyday, Petra was a very bustling city, and there would have been all kinds of traders and pilgrims and visitors walking through this narrow gorge. And here, this is interesting because it's almost touching each other, the walls up there, but this narrow little cab, this people cab, can fit through there. And you're coming out to see the most spectacular building, which is known as the Treasury. So you can just imagine travelers in ancient times emerging. We know what we're going to see because we saw the travel brochures or we saw the movies ahead of time. But in those days, you wouldn't have. So you come to this absolutely fabulous building, which is 130 feet tall and which is carved into the rock, which is probably the reason why it survived earthquakes and didn't ever crumble. And it's always been known as the Treasury, which is a falsehood. People have thought that there is buried treasure up in an urn here, and you can actually see bullet holes up there, but there is no treasure. It's believed to have been the mausoleum of King Aretas IV, and built, I think, around the 1st century BC. So just an absolutely fabulous building, and a lot of elements of Greco-Roman style. You've got this, up here, this facade, and then you have the Corinthian columns, and it's hard to see, but you have over here on either side the twins Castor and Pollux, who lived partially on Olympus and partially in the underworld, and who would escort the souls of departed heroes to the Elysian fields. You have up here a frieze with winged griffins and vases. You have Isis, the goddess of immortality, and then you have, I think it shows better here, you have up here eagles carrying, so a lot of symbols of death carrying the souls of the departed away, but just a spectacular building. You cannot go inside this building. Just inside the entrance, you read that there are 3 circular areas on the floor, probably which were for sacrificial offerings. There are teams that go in and study, but those are official archaeological teams. And actually during COVID, when everything has been shut down, Jordan has used this time to further studies and do things they couldn't normally do in normal tourist times. So lots going on here, a lot of people watching, a lot of, obviously, again, a chance to get your picture taken on a camel, tourist, little booth over there, but a gorgeous, and I should say that the Sikh, this whole rock leading in there, artistically described as, depending again on the time of day that you're there, swirling pinks and purples and golds depending how the sunlight hits it. So just a beautiful, beautiful area. We were not there because they did not do this on January 31st and December 31st and the 1st of January, but they do have something extra which you can purchase and attend when they have luminaries called Petra by night, so we did not do that, but anyway, there's a picture of it. And then again, in the gentleman in the front row, that's right, King Hussein and Queen Noor were in London in 1989, and they met Harrison Ford and Steven Spielberg, who were filming parts of Indiana Jones in a studio outside of London, and Queen Noor had the idea to invite them to come to Jordan and film part of the movie there, not only good financial sense, but also public relations and showing the world what the country had. So in the final scene of Indiana Jones, they burst out of the Sikh and go into the treasury appropriately enough to find the Holy Grail. So another movie that was filmed in Jordan in 1989. And this was done by a British watercolor painter in 1839. He painted quite a number of the features and did very well. And this is actually our son. I didn't care to do this, but there is a place across from the treasury where you climb up, and they have this carpet, and you get this, you know, you can have a great photo souvenir. It wasn't my cup of tea, but Michael and his sister went up there. So here he is looking very like a poster picture for the treasury behind him there. And then we continued, and you walk all over Petra and you see more tombs. This is a triclinium where there are benches inside where people were, as we have seen in pictures of the Romans, where they would recline and you know, be dining. These are gin blocks, which are funerary blocks right here. There's a lot to look at walking around. There's also an amphitheater here, slightly smaller than the one in Amman. There is this is known as the Palace of the Pharaoh's Daughter. Very unusual that it's still standing because of the earthquakes. The earthquakes that destroyed, finally, Petra had been taken over by the Romans, but in 363 AD and again in 500-something AD, earthquakes pretty well did a real number on the city. But it's amazing that this is standing. So it is believed that perhaps because the four sides are all equal, and they also used wooden string coursers in the construction of the walls, that it is still there. This had been a religious building where only priests could enter. Then again, people are allowed to walk all over the hillside here and look in these caves. When Petra became a UNESCO heritage site, there were Bedouins living in the caves, and the government of Jordan had to evict them. And there were a lot of hard feelings at the time because they had been there for thousands of years. But it had to be done. These goats, of course, can never be evicted. This is their home. And then we have this, this is the Great Temple, which is probably the largest building there, which was first discovered by a team of Brown University archaeologists around 1993. And now they've done so much work on it, and all the ideas about what it might have been. I say, you know, royal reception hall, and 25,000 square feet. That's a large area. Largest freestanding building in Petra. Also above the ground, you walk up the steps to reach the area. But just fascinating. They also had these massive underground cisterns. And look how big they are to collect and store the water. And then they would be connected through canals and latticed, you know, the city, that's how it could keep going with its population and also grow the architecture. So just a lot there. And the temple, again, always some souvenirs over on the side here, the info board, the columns and what's left of it. And this is the Colonnaded Street. This would have been built by the Romans in the 1st century. It would have been used commercially. Maybe there were stores there also for some ceremonial processions. And this is what was left after the 2 earthquakes. So just so much to look at. One day doesn't really do it justice. And having said after all of that, here you've gone through here and you're in this area. And if you have a lot of energy, you can go up to this monastery, as it's called. And by that time, you will be 3 miles from the visitor center. So you have to remember you have to walk back again because you cannot overnight in Petra. So if you're really energetic, you can climb up and see the monastery, which you saw on my first slide, which was probably a religious purpose, and it had a flat area in the front for social gatherings. But what's fascinating about that are the views over the surrounding countryside that you can get when you're up there. And again, the souvenir sellers. So definitely worth the climb if you have the energy, but it's not an easy climb. Here are the steps going back up. You will see sometimes people on a little donkey going up, but yeah, I put up there not for the faint of heart, but definitely worth the view. And then this is Little Petra. This is a suburb. There is a way that you can hike from the monastery to Little Petra. This is like a suburb, I suppose you could have said. We got a kick out of this sign, the best view in the world, and they had steps climbing up to another view. But if you do that hike from the monastery over to this site, you should have a guide with you to make sure you don't get lost, because you don't really want to get lost out there. So just a beautiful, fabulous trip to Petra. And again, the souvenirs were ubiquitous and affordable. And some of them, you know, a lot of them handicrafts that mostly the women make to earn a living. I could go for about 15 minutes to talk about this man, but suffice to say, after these 2 earthquakes happened, Petra pretty much was forgotten to the world. And it was just, no one even knew it existed. And then not really until 1812, this gentleman who was born in Switzerland, but who became a specialist traveling in those countries and who became fluent in Arabic and also the native garb, the first European to lay eyes, and they note the date there because he had heard rumors, and he actually went through the Sikh and saw the treasury. And then after that, word spread and became famous. And I said already it was the #1 archeological site in Jordan. And actually, if you remember, in 2007, we have the 7 wonders of the ancient world that we always hear about. And then in 2007, there were votes taken so the 7 wonders of the modern world, and Petra is one of those 7 wonders, which is a title that it has earned in every way. So a tribute to Johann Ludwig Burckhardt here. And his discovering or rediscovering the rose-colored city is another synonym for Petra. Sometimes it's called that because of the color of the rock. So after that, and then I just thought this was a cute play on words. So not the Cleopatra Hotel, but the Cleopatra Hotel. And then just, I just love the signs that we see in other countries. We offer you home away from home. So hopefully that was true for the people who were staying there. And we didn't go to Aqaba. I had said that already, the Red Sea port, but those are some of the views there. The royal family also has a home on the seaside there, and it's their big getaway out of Amman. So when we decided to leave Petra, we wanted to drive along the Dead Sea on the way back to Amman and actually stand at the world's lowest point. And so that was the marker there. And so it was a serpentine road actually built with European Union funds. And here we are, 1,400 feet below sea level down there, just to get a perspective. You don't feel any different. You just see the sign and you know you're there. And, but this would be sea level, and here we are down at the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is not something that you can really use for anything. It's 9.6 times saltier than the ocean, so boats don't sail in it, fish cannot swim in it, and animals can't survive. This shepherd here with his camels, he's not bringing them to drink the water of the Dead Sea. So it's very, very salty, but it's big business, both on the Israeli and the Jordanian side, for spas, and everybody loves to go into the Dead Sea, and you get this very famous picture of, well, actually, that's you know what, did I skip? Let me see. No, this is one of the souvenir stops that we were at that they take you to, and they do shipping all over the world. They make it very easy and convenient. But the, I lost a slide. Well, what I wanted to say was that, that there is an iconic picture of people lying on their backs in the Dead Sea reading a newspaper. But you don't want to stay for a long time there because people drown in the Dead Sea very easily. If you were to flip over and literally 2 or 3 swallows, the electrolyte balance in your body is completely upset and your system starts to shut down. So there have been unfortunate drownings. So after you do put your toes in there or lie on your back and read a newspaper and have somebody take a picture of you, you really want that freshwater pool back at your fancy spa. So we didn't have time for that, but they all look absolutely gorgeous. Now, having said that, the flip side of the Dead Sea is that the magnesium, so the products made from the Dead Sea salt, the magnesium for the skin, the calcium for the hair, they are very, very famous. I'm sure there are also many imitation products that are made, but so that is a benefit for both, again, Jordan and Israel. And and then the souvenir shop that I mentioned. And then we didn't need, but we took our little Berlitz. This was actually, I had a book that I've had for 40 years. We didn't really need it at all because it was so easy with English. And then we always had this little medical kit with us. We didn't, which is, you just never know in a foreign country, but we didn't need any of it. So that was another wonderful, wonderful thing for us. And then at the airport on the way out, again, we have some really nice sweet shops, especially in East Dearborn along Warren Avenue. And this was also a very pretty one at the airport there. So back to the beginning again with the beautiful scroll. So this is my presentation from ancient Amman to the deserts of Jordan, and that's my website, mariyatravels.net. And that's it. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed going on this journey with me and with my family. I think we were really incredibly lucky to go, and we just had a really wonderful time. We'll never forget that trip. So you're welcome. Thank you all for being such good listeners. So if anybody has any questions, I always say questions, comments, criticisms. You have to be open to everything. But if anybody has any questions, please feel free. I think you're going to get the mic there for that. Yeah.
I've always wondered why they call it the Dead Sea, and now I think I know, because do people flip over accidentally, or do they just go on their stomach? I just never heard that before.
I don't really know how you would flip over, although I suppose if you, I really can't answer that question. I just read about it that you just don't ever want to take even one swallow of that water. And I don't know where the Dead Sea name came from. That's also a good question.
Well, I've never heard that before, because I was wondering, at such oxygen levels, I hear the vegetables grow big, so I'm wondering why, they call it the Dead Sea. That might be the reason.
Well, maybe it is because there are literally no fish. There's no life in it. Maybe just because of that. And yeah. I hadn't had the personal when I was in Israel in 1976, I did put my foot in it, but I never went and did the newspaper reading bit or anything like that. And so I was never in danger of my demise at the time. So, yeah.
And was it pretty safe there? I know, like, in the 70s they said it was safer, but you went 2019. Was it pretty safe?
We felt very safe. We felt very safe in Jordan, yes. In fact, our older daughter, she insists on going jogging no matter where we are. And the one thing about jogging in Amman is that the sidewalks are very uneven. It's an ancient city, and she just took off. But no, we never at any time felt like there was any issue. So that was, I can say that with no one, it was great. Yeah, there was nothing like that. And it's also in the interest of the country to keep it safe for tourists. I mean, I'm sure things can happen, but we didn't see any sign of that at all. And I should say, when we were down in Wadi Rum, and I said we were trading stories in the youth hostels, there were a lot of single women traveling around there. I mean, we had a van for our family, but the bus, when I was in Israel beforehand, I took buses everywhere. You can take buses everywhere in Jordan. It's very easy to get around, and they were, there were no bad stories, let me put it that way, that we heard. So we were very fortunate, and yeah. So anybody else? Do you have a question for me, sir?
Well, did you visit the Valley of Megiddo in Israel?
The Valley of Megiddo? I don't think I did. I don't know the name, to tell you the truth.
Valley of Megiddo in the Book of Revelations, that's supposed to be the final battle between good and evil. Up there, and it's going to be fought at the site of Megiddo, so to speak.
I see.
I thought maybe you might have went to that site by chance.
Oh, right. Yes. No, that was not one place that I visited, but there's always a next time.
Okay.
Yes. In fact, I'll look it up. I'm intrigued.
It's got something to do with the Antichrist, because you have Lucifer, the devil, and the Antichrist.
I see.
Just like you have that's the unholy Trinity, then you have the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, It's something about that along those lines up there.
Right. Not
it's
yet.
Lucifer, Satan, and the Antichrist.
You're talking about in Israel now, right?
Right.
Right, yes. No, but I will look it up and read about it. Yeah.
How long was Petra a city?
So really, they find, it is said back to the 4th century BC, but the evidence that they found in the city is from the 2nd century BC onward. So then through to when the Romans came in, it was still a city when the Romans came. The Nabataeans were not in charge anymore. and their empire was starting to fade, and it did fade.
So people lived there for several hundred years?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Yeah. So yeah, which is just incredible when you think about the water scarcity and how they kept the population going, and it was a thriving city. Yeah, yeah. With the traders coming in, and would have been fun to be a fly on the wall, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe you'll get a chance to go. Maybe you'll get to see one of the movies I mentioned, and you can be an armchair traveler. There's nothing wrong with that. I love being an armchair traveler. But thank you again for coming this evening. And oh, sure.
You said in Indiana Jones that when they went in to look for the
Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail, they went into that, or
yes,
supposedly
they did have permission to go into the treasury. Yes.
The treasury, okay.
Yes, your average tourist does not enter.
We'll have to watch that scene
They have to be careful, you know, because the stone, we have acid that we don't know about on our skin, stearic acid, and so over hundreds of years, with many people touching, it can, you know, it can do damage.
It can wear away.
And so nobody enters that, except for archaeology teams or people doing 3D imaging or, you know, very sophisticated mapping. That's a different story.
Yeah, or Steven Spielberg.
Right, or Steven Spielberg. Yeah, you have a certain license to go places if you're Steven Spielberg, yes.
Cool.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. It was a clever idea of Queen Noor and King Hussein to suggest that they come to Jordan and film that particular scene there.
I wonder where they were going to go.
I don't know.
Until that happened.
I know. I don't
They
know.
had plans.
If I ever meet Stephen, I'll have a question for him. That would be so cool.
Yeah. Then do another presentation.
Yes.
Here.
Well, you know, we were in Berlin when he filmed. If you know the Bridge of Spies with Tom Hanks, where they're talking about the exchange on the famous bridge in Berlin where they exchanged the Cold War spy. So Steven Spielberg filmed that movie when we were living there, and we tried to get close to the bridge, but it was pretty well roped off. But that's probably the closest I'll ever get to him. So, yeah.
Is that the one where they exchanged Francis Gary Powers for
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, exactly. That's also a great movie. Yes, yeah. That's in my Berlin talk, which I gave at this library probably 3.5 years ago now. Yeah, yeah. You might have been here. You've been so loyal coming to all of my talks.
Well, no, I know some of the stuff, but I don't know a lot of the stuff. You know, some things I know, sometimes I don't know. But I do remember, Francis Gary Powers out there.
Yes.
He got shot down over Russia.
Yes.
With a U-2 spy plane. And it was a button he was supposed to press to blow up the plane, but he didn't do it.
Oh, here, they want you to hold the microphone to talk about Francis Gary Powers.
Okay, anyway, he, parachuted out, was captured by the Russians, and the Russians, also found the U-2 spy plane with everything on it out there. They found out a silenced .22 pistol, a silver dollar that had poison in it. That's who was supposed to kill himself if he got caught, but he didn't do that out there. And then there was supposed to be a meeting between President Eisenhower and Nikita Khrushchev up there. They're supposed to discuss peace and all that stuff. And the meeting really fell apart, especially when Khrushchev accused, Eisenhower of spying. He says, "No, we're not spying." I says, "The hell you're not out there." He showed him the pictures of, the wreckage of the U-2 spy plane. He said, "We also captured the pilot too, so don't give me that stuff out there." And the meeting just fell apart from there. That's part of the Cold War lore, as they say.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, we know what to say.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, Spielberg made a great movie out of that. So, but yeah, back to Jordan. It's a small country. It has 10 million people. 4 million of them are in Amman, and but it's definitely worth a visit. When things get easier at some point in time, and I know someone who's going in October with a tour group. So tourism is up and running, but it's very Tourism is very iffy right now. I know my sister was supposed to fly to Berlin the day before Thanksgiving and go on a Viking cruise down the Elbe River. But honestly, even Germany and Czech Republic, the COVID rates are such that and the Christmas markets, many of them have been canceled again this year. So they just decided their trip wasn't going to be. And so it's just all still very iffy. But you have to have hope. So, yeah. Okay, well, thank you again. Thank you again so much. Really appreciate you coming, Bethany. Thank you.